Goody, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, what's up, man? How's it going?
It's going well, going well. So I'm really happy to join me. We had a little back and forth on Twitter, and this is a little impromptu for those who aren't aware. But wanted to have a post-election sync and get some different perspectives from the carnivore community on the latest election of Mr. Donald J. Trump. What do you think, man?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, by the way. This is you're the very first person in my life to ever have me on any sort of podcast or anything, so it's pretty cool.
Nice, nice.
But yeah, dude. Well, this is crazy, right? Like it's all happened in the last 12 hours, and I'm trying to make of it like like these days when like someone big like passes away
Yeah,
and
yeah.
people are like, "Holy shit, this is crazy," but then like a day later, everyone's like on to the next topic, like. I'm trying to tell if that's like what's going on with Trump. Like, are people already like, okay, whatever, it's Trump or what? But off top, it is what it is. I'm not too surprised. What about you?
Yeah, I'm definitely not surprised. I called this a million miles away. I saw this coming. So you're not surprised. So how do you feel about it generally?
Um, as I was telling a couple buddies earlier, I really personally didn't have the best feeling coming out of it either way. I'm a third party voter.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Trump and Kamala both were not the most intriguing for the topics that I value personally. So, I was kind of just in the bleachers sitting this one out and watching from the stands. Like, my mom was hitting me up, like, register to vote, like, do this and that. Like, I could have did it, but I was like, I'm sorry. As an American, it's my right to vote, but it's also my right not to vote if I don't want to. So,
Hey,
yeah.
we got that in common, man. I certainly sat this one out too, but of course I set all of them out, so that's not surprising. You said you're a third party voter, so what's the third party, man?
Yeah, so I mean my entrance into politics is pretty new. I graduated high school in 2016, which is 8, 9 years ago, almost
Hmm.
9 years now. And so my town where I'm from actually uh caucused for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary over Hillary Clinton. So I come from like a decently liberal area just by nature. And so I right out the gate was like a big Bernie Sanders fan and definitely was red pilled a little bit like from some of the things I was taught in school. Like I'm just being honest. I'm not saying that for better or worse. But yeah, so Bernie Sanders and then like how politics goes, like everyone gets into their candidate. Like if you're the people I follow on Trump, some people post the craziest shit. Like I'm not saying that in a bad way or a good way. Again, it's just like, whoa, never I had not gone down that rabbit hole yet type shit. And like you do the same thing with your candidate. So like with Bernie Sanders for me, the DNC leak happened and like you really look into that and you're like, wow, he got fucked over. And then 2020, it happens again and he gets fucked over again with the Iowa primaries. He like supposedly wins it, but then they're like, there's a glitch in the system. It's like, man, even Trump is coming out saying he feels bad for this guy. And but I also felt like he kind of gave in kind of early, and I'm like, dude, why do you just give in so early? Like tap out on running. And so I was kind of like, fuck Bernie for like a little bit the last couple of years, and like just whatever, fuck the system. Uh, but no, yeah. So I'm the way I would describe myself as uh, I'm pretty laissez-faire from a social perspective. Like what I just based on experiences from talking to other people from both sides of the coin is like it's really hard to get people to agree on social things.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So, but I'm not the biggest fan of big government, but big government's inevitable. So. I think if you have a big government, you probably need it to be fiscally progressive. So that's mostly why I like Bernie Sanders was for his fiscal politics.
Got it, got it. And it's interesting because there's so many parallels on the other side. So if you paid attention to politics for a while, I know you're a younger dude than I am, but you watched, Bernie basically got the Ron Paul treatment. Ron Paul did the exact same thing in 2008, and they completely shafted him at every turn. And it was very clear that the major party conventions, DNC, the RNC, they select rather than elect for the most part. Like they're not going to let anybody who's not a pre-approved candidate through, except for Trump. Kind of surprised me because he wasn't part of that machine. He kind of slipped through the filter somehow. So he's kind of an interesting case study. Definitely, and not a Trump supporter. I think he was one of the worst presidents in his first term. Was one of the worst presidential terms in our history. Um, but he's at least interesting, being sort of not part of that machine, being an outsider like a Bernie Sanders, like a Ron Paul. I don't know how the hell he got in, and I definitely don't know how the hell he got reelected. It was
It's
definitely
almost it's almost like in the hood, right? Like if you watch vlogs of like Southside gangsters, they'll be like, "Oh fuck Kamala, like go Trump, go Trump." And I think basically what it is like the last decade or whatever, the Democrats they kind of present themselves as like we're here for the working class, we're here to help
yeah,
the
yeah.
people. But it's like, dude, it this year on July 4th, there was like over 100 people shot in 24 hours here in Chicago. It's like nothing's changing. It's just a reoccurring cycle. So when these people are making vlogs and they're saying, Trump 2024, they don't actually like Trump. They just know that they don't like Democrats.
Yeah, and that's been an interesting thing for me to observe, because I'm just full disclosure. I'm more on the libertarian side. I'm technically an anarchist, but I'm in that.
Technically an anarchist.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I
Yeah,
hate that term because it's such a polluted
taboo.
term. It's just it evokes images of dudes dressed in black like Antifa throwing Molotov cocktails through windows and burning shit. That's not what anarchy is, right? It's
Very true.
actually it's an ethical framework. It is it's an ethical question and how you approach politics, right? Which is essentially, does one group of people get rights that other people don't get, meaning government, right? So, for example, you and I understand that stealing is wrong, right? Like we, even if you and I have a common neighbor between us who's starving, Goody can't go down and point a gun in my face and say, "Hey, you have a fridge full of stuff. I'm going to go, expropriate this from you and give it to this person because they're starving," right? So that we would all understand that to be deeply immoral, and we can't have that happen. That would constitute an ethical violation.
Mm.
And so all anarchy is saying is that everyone is equal, and just because you put on a badge and a costume doesn't give you additional rights to act in a way that, if anyone else did that same action, would be a crime. So it's just, from an ethical perspective, it is consistency from person to person. That's all it is. If you extrapolate that, and go further, that's where, it's really the core of libertarianism. It's something called the non-aggression principle. That's kind of what they focus on. But long story short is that the libertarian folks and then a bunch of other coalitions of people that didn't really like Trump backed him this election. And I think, to your point, like with the hood analogy, it's like some people are just like seeing him as like the system hates this guy, does not want him to take power, and so they're like, you know what, fuck you. Like I might not agree with Trump. I might have deep disagreements, but LOL. Send
Yeah.
it. Where it's like there's something about him that really has people, you know I don't know how he does this, but he just gravitates this sort of mass around him from a bunch of different ideologies and political leanings and backgrounds. And shit, he won, dude. So I mean, I'm a little bit impressed.
Yeah, he won. It's definitely impressive, and I'm a little bit more dystopian than the average person. So sometimes I wonder, like, if you're going to be the president, I feel like they're pretty meticulous. Like, I still find it hard to believe that you can make it so far that you can be the president, and like, if there is the deep state or whatever, tinfoil hat, like to assume he's not part of it is, I don't know. Like I'm trying to see it from optics. But yeah, like his relationship with like the WWE, he's a great actor. And he's really good friends with like Vince McMahon, and that's again, like I'm very fiscally progressive, as I would identify. That sounded so fucking liberal to say, as I identify. But
Yeah, so
um,
yeah, some pronouns
yeah,
as fiscally
yeah,
progressive.
but it's like, with the social issues, there's a lot of noise, and it's easy to get convoluted. But then, like, you just gotta look at like his income tax plan, corporate tax rate. Like, it's like kind of a trickle down economics type thing, and I don't personally believe in that, and that's why I'm just kind of like, we'll see how it plays out. But if you go and ask a random person, why are you voting for Kamala? Why are you voting for Trump? Nobody's talking about fiscal politics. It's all social issues for the most part. And
It depends, right? So here's a good question, and you live in a more liberal area than I do, so maybe you've had more interactions with folks. But have you met anybody who sincerely, when you're talking to them one on one, is just jazzed about Kamala Harris as a candidate and her policy prescriptions?
no, 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 no,
Have you
no.
met anybody who even can articulate what her policy prescriptions are? Because I'm pretty connected to politics. I pay attention to this
What
stuff. I can't name like one thing
it's
from her platform other than she's like, I'm not Trump. Like that seems like that is the only portion of her platform that anyone cares about.
Yeah, I mean, to be transparent, I didn't pay too much attention to Kamala's, campaign. But, I think if you look at her rhetoric, it's a lot of anti-Trump, watch out for Project 2025 and
Hmm.
whatever. So, you know, there's a level of conditioning involved where if you go and ask a Kamala supporter, what do you like about Kamala? It's more so trying to prevent Trump. So like they've literally created this rhetoric of, I don't need to necessarily know what Kamala is doing, but I know she's pro. She's a woman of color, so she's pro, minority and what. But it's also like devil's advocate. There's very conservative women of color in the
Oh,
Republican politics,
sure, for sure.
So, um, but I think it's yeah, like people. I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it's just anti-Trump.
I really think so too, and I think that the DNC thought that they could run the same playbook as they did with Biden. Because same thing. Like I've never met another human being who was even mildly excited about Joe Biden or any of his policies. It was literally, hey, I'm not Trump. Please vote for me. And this is an interesting thing too, is the media twisting reality. And I'm glad that we've gotten to a
Yeah,
point where at least we could admit that some fucked up shit was going on. You had, Biden, who like we were all watching this in real time, and everyone was commenting, particularly on the right, saying like, "This guy's brain is a bowl of oatmeal. Like that, this dude is not right. This person is the president of the United States. Got his finger on the nuclear button. Is not there. He's checked out." And we saw this. There was a great cut up that was posted on X a while ago of all of the media channels, the usual suspects, the MSNBC, the CNN, like, and they're going in great depth, just like, oh, this is the sharpest Joe Biden we've ever seen. This guy is on top of his. And I'm like, come on, man. There's this sort of like complete disconnection with the corporate media from reality is like a real problem. It's shocking to me, and it's actually shocking to me that Kamala did so poorly last night with all of that corporate media, pushing at the wind at her back, being so against Trump and then so for her. Like to see her perform so poorly, it was really an indictment, I think.
yeah. And this, to your point, this is where I get like a little dystopian, and I feel like we're getting like Jedi mind fucked, where it's like the 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 Central Intelligence Agency or whoever is like controlling these agendas, like I feel like they're a lot smarter than we anticipate, and so like sometimes I feel like we're being trolled, honestly, where it's like, yeah, we know Joe Biden looks stupid. We want Americans to see him and see that he is an idiot, right? No, for lack of better words, like he's old, man. He's not fit to run. And Kamala is like, it's like she's trying to like memorize some sort of script. Like I don't think she's stupid, but like she's not doing that good with like oration, and it doesn't seem like they give a fuck. And so it's almost like they're like intentionally like making Trump look good. Like it just feels like a social experiment of like propaganda and shit like that to me. Like just as someone that's not supporting either party, it's just been like really weird to watch all this unfold.
It is weird, and I get that same sense, right? Like, I'm very skeptical of any sort of straightforward narrative around this stuff because I've always viewed politics as a little. To you referenced WWE. I think there's a lot of similarities. I feel like there's these folks in the back room that are making all the deals, and they're controlled by a lot of these moneyed interests, these billionaires, these big corporations. They really direct the agenda, and they put out, like with WWE, you have the good guys and the heels. There's a team. Pick your team. You got Dems, you got Republicans, and they pretend to fight with each other, and then get people all ginned up, and you vote, as a show, like, oh, look, my thing matters. They're actually taking my perspective into consideration, but ultimately it's just a puppet show. That's what I think it largely is.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the interesting thing for me about Trump is, like, it feels like either this is part of a really grand show, or he broke the paradigm somehow, and I still don't know. I'm sixes on which is true.
Yeah, I mean, he was literally on Celebrity Apprentice, or like the host of it or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's weird what's going on. And yeah, I can't tell if Trump is like trying to tell us something or if he's just an idiot, because like he'll be like talking about the polls and how like they're full of shit, but he low key does the same thing. And
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
and then the other thing is he talks about viewers, and he's really big on viewers too, but it's like obviously that's what the media cares about is viewership. So it's like
Mhm.
MSNBC, if you look at it like a thing of theater, like just communication major here, if you're looking at it as a theater, MSNBC, ABC, they know their place for sure. Like they know that they're going to get way more viewership from a guy like Trump. So while they put up these fronts like
Mm.
Trump, I wouldn't be surprised if they're voting for him behind closed doors.
Yeah, yeah, I've thought that too. Because you look at what happened after Biden was elected, viewership at all those major networks just fell off a cliff. Like, they made their bread and butter by being the anti-Trump, media voice, and they lost a ton of eyeballs when he went out of the office. So I think they're licking their chops. I think they're like, hey, we're gonna have a lot of fun with this.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, I mean, it's easy to get lost in like the social issues, but I get confused because like for example, I was listening to Trump on Joe Rogan. Did you listen to that?
I did.
He kind of like compares himself to JFK and how he admires JFK. Well, just to objectively speak, not try to like be biased, but like if you compare their taxes. Like JFK had the corporate tax rate at like 52%. He had the top income tax bracket at 92% for people making over $400,000. But this is in 1963. So that top tax bracket would only apply in modern day to anyone that's making $4 million a year. So it's way different. Like so when people talk about top tax brackets these days, like they're putting people as low as like anyone making $400,000 a year in the top bracket. Where I don't think that necessarily makes sense. But yeah, long story short, without getting confused, like it's just kind of weird how both Trump and Kamala have very low tax proposals compared to someone like John F. Kennedy. And it, it, the thing is, like, they're never gonna lower taxes. It's that's literally what pays for our federal revenue. But what they will do is they can shift who's paying those taxes. And right now, the problem is a majority of our federal revenue is being raised from the payroll tax and income taxes. And since income taxes are mostly a burden on working class people, and also payroll taxes are mostly a burden on working class people, you can just use a little common sense and just be like, oh, so actually working class people are paying for most of these taxes. Or sorry,
Well,
the
well,
federal.
well, kind of. I think you got some of that right. I think some of it's a little off. Like, for example, payroll taxes, when you think about them, they sound like they're coming out of your paycheck. And the way it actually works in reality is it's a split between your employer. It's like an even split between the employer. So the corporation is paying half of the payroll taxes and the employee is paying half of the payroll taxes.
Yeah.
Income tax is an interesting one because actually the majority of income taxes, if you look in aggregate, not by percentage, but by total, are paid by the really wealthy people. Like they're the ones that there's just no getting around, income tax to some degree. There's obviously folks that make money via capital gains primarily. There's a bunch of different ways you can, structure things to try to minimize your tax burden. But if you look at who actually pays the taxes, it's always the rich people. The middle class doesn't really pay a lot of taxes. There's like over half of Americans don't pay any income taxes. When they actually settle for the year and they get the return, they end up actually net takers. And so that's an interesting call out. I think people aren't really aware of that. Also, I think people aren't aware of corporate income taxes, because yes, you can charge a corporation income tax, but they're just going to pass that along and increase cost of services and goods to consumers. So I mean, taxing corporations, because they're not people, they're entities, it ends up falling back on the consumers anyway, so you're going to pay it one way or the other.
So how do you prevent the incentivization of things like inflation?
Oh, that's a great one. This is where I think you and I will differ, because you said you're fiscally progressive, which I take to mean,
For
and
my
correct
and
correct.
just for like to understand my viewership, like I'm low key like anti big government, and I think I'm probably libertarian by nature, but I also think that big government is probably inevitable. Like look at how big the US government is. So that's I feel like if you have a big government, it should be fiscally progressive. That's all. But
Well,
go on.
well, well. You asked a question about inflation, right? So let's
Yeah.
ground in some definitions first. So, how do you define inflation, first of all?
Just like basically an incentive for a business to raise costs and also the raise cost of goods without necessarily matching it with the cost of living. That's how I would define it personally.
Okay, that doesn't jive with mine, but that's okay. Like, well, as long as we settle on definitions ahead of time, so we don't talk you past each other. So the way I look at this, and I'm a monetary policy nerd, so excuse me, this is a very libertarian slash autist trait. But inflation, if you look at it definitionally, actually means, think about inflating a balloon, right? So it's increasing the size of the pool of money that's in circulation, right? And so there's metrics. You have M1, you have M2, you have M3. These are the figures that the Federal Reserve keeps track of, right? And this is how many dollars are in circulation as measured in various different ways. M2 is the most broadly accepted version, or the one that people mostly focus on, right? And so what people think about with inflation, which I think you're alluding to, is higher prices. Right. So it's always like inflation. Oh, things are going up. And so really the higher costs that we see are not inflation. That's a consequence of inflation. Right. So if you increase the money supply, what you've done is dilute the value of each discrete dollar in circulation, which means that the actual number of dollars that it takes to buy the same good year over year increases. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you asked a question about how you would combat inflation. Well, the driver of inflation is money printing, and money printing comes from progressive government policy. It's spending a shit ton of money, borrowing and printing money out of thin air is actually what drives inflation. So if you have a big government, which you think is inevitable, and I think it is too, I think there's no question that you give the government the power to do what they do, and they're going to take it to the nth degree, and it's going to it's going to go this it's going to travel the same arc that this always goes, which is start with a very small government, become very prosperous and wealthy, it attracts parasites, the government class, the swamp, whatever you want to call them, starts to sort of parasitize the country, and then you have the death of an empire like Rome. Like everything crashes, the currency gets devalued and destroyed, and then you got to start over, reboot. And so I do agree with you. I just don't think it's good, right? Like if I'm, aiming at podcasts, we're supposed to be pointing at the good. Like I would rather have, fiscal responsibility. I would rather have no government and free markets like that. That's my view.
Maybe the better term would be price gouging. You know what?
Yeah, what does that mean though? This
Well,
is a very
just in
interesting.
when we talk about inflation, you said it yourself. There's a common understanding in the public that when we talk about inflation, we're talking about the raising of goods, so prices on
Mhm.
things. So, like my sister works in supply chain, for example, and she told me if only you knew how cheap we buy these fruits for and how expensive we sell them for. How do you prevent the like, incentivizing stuff like that from businesses from doing.
Free markets have this self-regulating capability, right? And the problem is we don't have a free market. Like everything is hyper-regulated, and there's a whole bunch. And we talked about those people, the WWE analogy, these guys behind the curtains that are, putting their fingers on the scales. There's a whole bunch of that gross shit that goes on. It gets written into legislation, into regulation, and these regulations don't protect the consumer and don't protect the people. They oftentimes benefit directly. Often these large multinational corporations, billionaire class, like the wheels are greased for these people, and we sort of pay for that. But in a free market, essentially, there's no such thing as price gouging, right? Because if you, for example, like let's say, I've got this can of, sparkling water here, and I'd say, Goody, I got this can here. I'm going to sell it to you for $1,000. You're going to tell me to go fuck myself. And there's going to be somebody else that's going to come in and offer it to you at a lower price. And they're going to clean house because nobody's going to want to buy it at $1,000 a can. They're going to want to buy it at, whatever the market rate is. And so, price is really just a function of, it's a signal. It's a measure of the desire of people for a particular good. It's supply and demand curves. In a free market, like supply and demand curves generally work. I mean, sometimes there's disruptions, like you've seen COVID when the supply chain started breaking down. Things get weird at times, and you can't prevent that. There's going to be issues that pop up, but ultimately, you can't really price gouge somebody unless, like I said, there's somebody putting their finger on the scale. Because people just go elsewhere. Like there's greedy capitalists that will just sell it to you for less, and they'll sell a shit ton more and make a bunch of profit.
Right. So how do you form a free market without a like monopoly forming? Is that possible? Is it impossible in a free market?
I think monopolies are functions of government, right? Not free markets, because just like I mentioned, there's competitors in a free market, right? There will always be a monopoly tendency where some group will be like, hey, I've got a bunch of competitors, I just want to buy them all up and then jack the prices all up. And you could potentially get away with it for a short period of time, but there's always going to be somebody that wants to come in and fill a certain niche, and we'll continue to compete, and we'll say, hey, fuck you, I'm not going to sell, I'm going to continue to build my market share. Competition keeps monopolies at bay. And I love the fact that people who are, pro-government are like, well, we can't have monopolies, yet the government is the largest monopoly in the country. And it's the worst kind of monopoly because they're like Elon Musk called out. It's like they're a monopoly that has, they're the only ones who can deploy force. Like they can actually murder you for disagreeing with them. And so like like people kind of forget that. They're like, oh, we really can't have monopolies. But like, well, we actually have one. What are you talking about?
As a libertarian, you would abolish the federal government?
All government.
But how do you do that? Like, how
I don't know.
realistic?
Great question, Goody. Fuck, man. I wish I knew.
I think we all would want to, because, like, for example, my Grammy, my mom's maiden side is Métis. They used to have like their own little territory out in Manitoba, and then railroads happened, the bison population got destructed, and literally Canada's government just took over, because typically with traditional Native Americans, they would fiddle with them, and they would tell them one thing, and then they would put something different on a piece of paper. Well, Métis people actually spoke English. They were some of them were educated, and so you couldn't swindle them. So literally, the big government just said "fuck you" at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I'm right there with you. Like I'm not a big fan of excuse me, of big government, big entities in anything. But the problem I have is like, how realistic is it? Like, for the thing with anarchism is like, if you don't have that, you kind of do need to wait for something catastrophic to happen before that's possible.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think that it is possible, but it has to be intentional. Because a lot of people are always like asking me, well, if you had a magic wand, you could, erase all government tomorrow. Would you do that? And I'm like, fuck no. That would be a terrible situation. It really would.
It's
like
the police. I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
well, yeah, I mean, and that's a great one. Let's talk about that. I am for abolishing the government police, but like like everyone who's not a moron understands that police serve a very valuable function, right? Protecting people and property That's like a really fucking valuable function. But what I oppose is a monopoly on police, meaning like if you saw the George Floyd situation, they go out there and start choking out black people in the street. I would like to be like, excuse me, I would like to cancel my service and go with a different provider, please. Uh, and
That's
now it's
hilarious.
like and the cops now is like we have a monopoly. They're like, fuck you, like burn the city down. We don't care. What are you going to do? Like you have one choice, and if it sucks, and if it's expensive, and if we're murdering people, like tough shit. Like I don't like that. I like the ability to vote with my dollars and be like, you know what, fuck you. I don't agree with your principles, the way your company is run, your organization's run. I'm taking my money and going elsewhere. The government says, pay up or we're going to shoot you. Like I don't
Well, the
like that
biggest
paradigm.
the problem I have too is like even maybe on a more conservative end is like these people do highly controversial things. Like Kim Potter accidentally shot a guy and thinking it was her taser, which like
Yeah.
okay, miss I hate to say this, but like okay, let's just say mistakes happen. But like y'all are gonna like pay her like paid leave to go live in like a warm state and like just run a fucking lemonade stand. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. What
Like
are you going
what
to do
is
about it, Goody? What are you going to do about it?
nothing. I
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
knew her kids went to high school with me and like totally normal kids. That's the thing that's weird about it. I don't think she's a bad person. I think it was truly a mistake, but just some of the sentiments they said, like Minneapolis specifically had like, because I'm from Minnesota, like they had their own little run with it. I mean, because like I said, like I come from a really liberal high school, and like I'm still pretty progressive, but like I was on the side of like, fuck you, you're a Republican. Like I'm not like that anymore. I've come full circle. But like I went to a protest in like 2015 for Jamar Clark, who was a black dude, controversial, got shot and killed by the cops. So there was protests and stuff like that. For that was all over the news. And what happened with that is like we were kind of learning some stuff in English class, and the news we were learning about misinformation. And
Hmm.
so the news, I remember watching the news, and they were saying, "Oh, they're throwing rocks, they're throwing bottles." So I was talking to my buddies. I'm like, well, let's go check it out, like record stuff for the school news, yada yada yada. And we go, and we're like, this is pretty sick. Like it's really not like that crazy as you would think. I mean, it was a protest, but that's a different story. So Jamar Clark happened, and then Philando Castile happened, and then those officers got acquitted, and then George Floyd happened, and at that point, it was like, okay, you've already acquitted a bunch of police officers.
Hmm.
Fuck you guys. I remember I watched the video on Facebook and I was like, damn, that's pretty fucked up. And I was like, whoa, that was yesterday? So it's just crazy how like the media works and stuff. And I actually went to the first night of the marches because I have a journalism degree. So I really like this is what all happening when I was in college, and I like to like freelance record stuff. And so like that's my excuse to go to some of these things. And so I pulled up to it, and like the march was cool. It was peaceful at the time. But later that night, they ended up burning down the fifth precinct. So it got fucking crazy. And then that was when it all kind of started, which is weird to think about. But yeah.
Yeah, well, hey man, like I don't want to get too far in the weeds politically or philosophically. I wanted to stick to kind of what's happening here, and I wanted to poke at a little bit the question of the carnivore community, right? Because it feels like they are very much pro Trump and particularly pro Kennedy, right? So what do you take on? What's your take on that whole thing? Do you feel like an outsider, or do you feel like like I'm trying to get a vibe for how somebody like you
No, man,
feels,
we're
because I'm definitely a black sheep as well, and I kind of sit and watch this stuff, and I'm kind of like, wow, this is not
so
jiving with me.
so this is my motto that I do on Twitter is if someone follows me or before I follow someone, like I'll scroll on their page for a decent amount, and it's like if you post anything about low carb diet, carnivore, I'll follow you back or I'll follow you. And if you're a retweeter, I can easily just turn off retweets. I'm never gonna like mute someone that I follow. I'd rather just not follow you back. But the thing is, man, like I get it 100%. And like I'm like you at the end of the day. Like I think I'm like probably libertarian in nature. So like I like what happened to the Amish community, the New York Democrats like suing them, the this big push for seed oils, like, even though I can't tell if Trump is sincere or not. Like, he did all this RFK shit, and then next thing you know, he was like in McDonald's. He goes on Joe Rogan, talks
Yeah.
about seed oils, but is he actually gonna do pass bills against seed oils? Is the question. So I like that he's bringing the rhetoric to the forefront because I'm a big believer in rhetoric. Um, but I think, yeah, I don't know. In terms of the community, I actually originally come from Reddit, and I was permanently banned on Reddit. Fuck that website. But the Reddit community is not conservative at all. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
even on carnivore, like, it's all very, I don't know. It's not conservative, but it's specifically the Twitter carnivore community is very conservative, and you know. So just to wrap up that answer, like, it's hard to tell if a lot of people just like Trump because of, like, his takes on, you know, regenerative agriculture and pro U.S. Meats and produce, but also, like, I think people are just very conservative, even regardless of Trump on there.
Yeah, and I wonder also if people that, because you hear this trope all the time, that the people that are focused on their health and fitness, gym bros, and people that are eating meat and stuff, like they lean right for some reason. I don't know if it's like a genetic predisposition or there's something to it though. It feels like the people that are in the gym, people that care about their health,
Yeah.
they tend to lean a little bit more right, a little more conservative.
That's a good observation, and it's kind of interesting to, like, really step away from it and look at the scene objectively, where it's like that's very true. Like, my cousins on both sides of the family that are like men are all right wing leaning dudes. Like, never have been left wing at all. And one side is hunters, the other side is farmers. And a lot of my friends are left wing, or sorry, right wing, but the like you say, the ones that are into, like, fitness and stuff seem to be more right wing, and then the ones that are more into, like, partying and shit, then they might be a little left wing leaning. I have one good buddy that's like me. I have a couple friends that are like fuck the system type shit. But on that note, all my friends that are like fuck the system, they were probably the most quietest people this election. Two party politics is cool again.
Yeah, man, this is about blowing the top of my dome off because I can't make heads or tails of it. It feels like everything is mixed up. So, here's a couple of for examples. Dick Cheney coming out and supporting Kamala Harris
Weird as hell.
is, I'm like, what kind of alternate universe am I living in? And then you talk about you know
George Bush too.
well, yeah, but also the RFK thing, right? So how he got pulled in, and then all of a sudden,
Is that even
I'm like,
RFK?
well, it doesn't make sense to me, right? Because this is where I get really confused with the Republicans. It's like you all were rightly aghast at the COVID tyranny and all of the bullshit that happened with Operation Warp Speed, and the giveaways to these huge, Moderna and Pfizer around the vaccine. Like the Republicans are like torches and pitchforks over this shit, whereas Donald Trump is like, this is the crowning achievement of my first term. He never has backed off that position. He thinks the shot is the greatest thing ever, and then he brings in RFK, who, as we know, is like the polar opposite of this. It feels like I'm taking crazy pills every time I look at this. And then you talk about fiscal policy. Like Trump was the most fiscally, liberal president we've ever seen. He spent more money in his term. This is crazy to me. I checked this out. He printed more money in 1 month in 2020 than all of the dollars that had ever come into existence from George Washington until Barack Obama took office. He did
Wow,
that in 1 month.
that's crazy, man.
And then you have these like quote unquote conservatives like, yeah, man, we're going to shrink government. We're going to do Doge. We're going to bring in Elon Musk and Ron Paul. We're going to cut the shit out of government. It's like, hey, do you know who grew government? This is Trump. So
Yeah,
across the board, I see all of these dichotomies, and I'm like, is anybody making
never
any
built a
sense
wall.
anywhere? Yeah, yeah. I mean, just across the board, though, I'm just seeing all this crazy stuff, and so I'm wondering what the hell is going on. And some of it just feels reflexive because you look at the coalition that Trump built, and I get it. He's trying to stay out of prison. Like it was really important that he got reelected, personally. but also like these people that have been ejected from the Democrat Party, the Tulsi Gabbards of the world, right? And you've got even like Heather Hying. I'm not sure if you know who that is. It's Brett Weinstein's wife. Very liberal. I mean, very liberal. They taught at Evergreen State, which is down the street from where I used to live up in Washington. Super progressive people, super left, and a lot of these lefties, historical lefties, are getting pushed away into that Republican Party. It feels like the Democrat Party has just gone so far to the hard left that a lot of these people just sort of popped into like, oh, I guess we're Republicans now, and it's just such a weird thing to see, man. Like the state of this is just blowing my brain up.
Yeah, it kind of, to me, it still comes down to the, people don't like the left and they just naturally go to the right. But, myself personally, uh I I honestly am a little bit quiet in terms of politics, but the right has done a good job of not virtue signaling as much as people on the left. So you can ask a thought-provoking question more commonly to a group of right-wing people and they'll maybe be receptive to it. To like, I get stereotyped a lot as like a Trump supporter and this and that, which I get. But like, when you realize there's like a reality to stereotypes, like, I don't know, the left wing, like liberalism kind of pigeonholed itself with like political correctness and shit like that.
Identity
Because
politics, really, that's like the big
yeah,
thing.
identity politics. Because if you go into like a poor area, like throw that shit out the door. Like,
Yeah,
and so
right.
then you just realize this is just a suburban concept. What that you're getting virtue signaled by like fucking white chicks that grew up in 3-story houses. No offense. And so yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I don't know who coined this term, but it was the term was luxury beliefs. I saw it on Chris Williamson. He had somebody on there talk about this is a luxury belief. This is like you said. This is a these liberal white women in suburbia can do the crazy
Oh, it's real.
performative, most ridiculous aspects of leftism. That you're right. Like you go to a poor community, like you're trying to survive. Like you got real problems here in blue class or sorry blue
Well,
collar.
there's there's like tons of black people and people of color that are right wing leaning, and for some reason, left wing people just act like they don't exist, and it's really fucking ironic. And like that, I think that's the for me personally, like with my beliefs are like very fiscally progressive, but like with the social issues, like the Democrats are like very ironic in a lot of it. Like both sides are very ironic, but like them especially, like they're just very inclusive. It's weird.
What's been shocking to me is that the left, who has made a cottage industry of calling everyone and everything racist, treats anyone who's a minority who happens to be conservative in the most disgusting way I've ever seen. I'm not even going to say the phrases that I've heard, leveled against, black people that might be MAGA or whatever. Like, it's just blatant racism. Like I think they believe that if you are a minority, like you're just going to vote Democrat. Like they're entitled to your vote regardless of how you treat them. And I've heard a lot of these people saying that like, hey, like we're pissed off, we're fed up, we're not seeing anything from you on the Democratic side, so maybe we're going to give Trump a chance.
Yeah,
And I think the Democrats, like when they see that happen, instead of looking and being introspective, like, hey, what did we do? Maybe we should, rethink the way that we're approaching this. They end up just hurling, racially tinged, sometimes just straight up racist insults at
dude.
people of
Yeah,
color that might happen to think a little bit differently.
yeah. They're fucking weird, man. And here's a prime example. I'm not gonna say who. I'm not. It's not like anyone would even know who this person is. But I'm talking to this person about a Kamala Harris supporter about uh, politics, and I'm like, well, you realize like people from like poverty areas don't even believe in Kamala anymore. Like people from the South Side, like they don't like Kamala. Like they like a lot of them are like yelling Trump. And then the response I was provided with was, "Yeah, that's because they're uneducated." It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
dude. Do you realize how ironic this fucking sounds right now, dude? So it's weird. It's just suburbanism, like what you're saying. Um, but so back to the point about like Trump and spending. I feel like so like there seems to be like two issues here is like the spending, but then the biggest issue I have is like how that money is raised. I know you said like
Mm.
upper class pays for a lot of it, but it doesn't. I question like the accuracy of that compared to like previous times in our government. That's where like I haven't taken like a. I've looked at graphs and seen like the changes over time, but I haven't like you know it's been a minute since I've sat down and like really looked at it. But like so for I realized this last night. So like I've been telling people like GDP, but I've really been meaning to say federal revenue. Like
Yeah,
how's that?
I've got the graph up right now, and so share of total income taxes paid, and this data is from 2021 from the Tax Foundation, and the top 1% paid 45.8% of all of the income taxes in sum total. And so if you add the next bracket is 5% to 1%. So this is like the top income earners. So top 1%, top 5 to 1%. That's another 19.9%.
Wow.
So the vast majority of all the income taxes paid are paid by the top 5%. And then 10% to 5%. So you're talking about the top 10%, then that's another 10.2. And so you're talking almost 80% of all the income taxes are paid by the top 10% of earners. So it's heavily weighted towards the top.
You gotta send that to me. I'm curious to
Yeah,
see
yeah,
it.
I'll ping this to you right now.
I can't find. Oh, is this the one? This is yeah. I found what I was looking for as well. That I'll send.
Send it to you on Twitter in a DM right now, dude. There you go.
Okay, because that's the one I was looking at. That's just Wikipedia. Oh, that's interesting.
Oh yes, this includes my chart was around income taxes, which is what I thought we were talking about. But you also have excise, estate taxes, payroll taxes, corporate income taxes. Same source though from the tax foundation.
Yeah, this. So that's just those are the main things that make up federal revenue. And my only question is just like the burden that puts on working class people. Like you say, like for a payroll tax, like the employer and the employee pay a percent of the payroll tax, but if that payroll tax was less, would all of that money then go to the employee?
What do you mean?
Like your employer has to pay a tax, you have to pay a tax, but if that tax was less, that money you'd have more money in your.
Oh, for sure, you'd have more disposable income, for sure.
It's like if you get laid off and they're like, I'm going to give you 3 weeks pay, and then all of a sudden you're like, damn, I got fucked over by taxes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Uh,
that's what I'm saying. Like just like the weekly things like that, and then I don't know. Like when I look at this graph, like it's like you look at when JFK was president, and it's like a lot of the money was coming from individual income taxes, but then you look at like the percentage of it. I don't know. You just got to look into it, but I'm gonna look into the one you sent me as well.
yeah, and so it's interesting too because taxes aren't really the big issue, I don't think, right? I think a lot of it is government spending because this is one of the complaints I have against Trump is that he was like, "I want to cut all these taxes," right? But if you don't cut the equal amount of spending, what you're doing is just forcing the federal government to borrow money and print it out of thin air, which drives up inflation. And so you can't do that because we're already, I don't know if you're sure if you're aware, but we're spending over $1 trillion a year right now, which is one of the largest line items in the federal budget on interest of the debt that's already accrued.
Wow.
That's a
And then you can like how didn't I you might know more than me, but like I know we got fucked with the Wall Street bailout, but then there was
Mhm.
also that I don't know, we'll call it the Silicon Valley bailout or whatever happened
Talking
like
about the dot-com crash of 2000?
no, like a year ago, the shit that happened with the Silicon Valley Bank.
Oh, the banks. Yeah. Well, the banks always get bailed out, man. That's just a thing.
Yeah, but the it seems like that it falls on the consumer.
Well, it falls on the taxpayer. It's worse, right?
Or
Basically,
yeah,
all the government bails out the banks, and then so what you have essentially, this is the worst. This is like corporatism, right? This is private profits, right?
and
Some of
this was
these.
Obama, by the way.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing too, is that people don't realize that Obama was most of his donations came from Wall Street and from banks and big financial institutions. The dude was a
That
corporate whore
funny as hell.
through and through.
When you look at the Occupy Wall Street, it's not like George Bush was president, like it or Trump. It was fucking Barack Obama. You know, And
Yeah.
to your point about the corporate shit, like I was talking to a buddy, like we're saying like when you listen to Kamala speak, she sounds like a politician speaking to a corporation.
Yeah, right. Did you see the Tim Dillon quote on Rogan about she talks in gypsy curses?
No.
That was one of the funniest. But you have to look that up. That is a hilarious bit, but it's so true. Yeah, like talking about how she says the most. I think it was with the JD. There was a JD Vance episode this was on, and he was explaining it. It's like she says a million words to say absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
You know,
that's how it works, man.
it's a skill for sure, but God, she comes across as just being like just absolutely vacuous and empty headed.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Well,
and
that's how I felt listening to Trump. Funny as hell when he was like, uh, "Man, what's a secret? How'd you get into good shape?" And then he was like, "Genetics," and I'm just like, "Come on, man, you gotta be kidding me!" Like, no way. The big thing was about his weight loss, and now it's like, "Oh no, I've always been like this." It's like people eat that shit up though.
yeah, yeah, they do, they do. So we're running a little bit out of time here, about 10 minutes left. What do you think is going to happen now? So now that we got this bastard coalition from all these places that he used to get himself elected and stay out of jail, we're starting to hear some stuff come out of here. I don't know if you heard Thomas Massey was looking like he was being tagged to be part of the Department of Agriculture, and I think Paul Salatin was taking a position as well for was a real famous regenerative agriculture dude, particularly around beef. And so I'm seeing some talk like there's actually going to appoint some people that might do some good things. I wanted to get your take. Do you have any hope that Trump's going to do anything decent, or is it all going to be smoke and mirrors and bullshit like the first term?
Yeah, I mean, I have a low expectation for both Trump and Kamala from the start, and like I said, I'm really big into like federal taxation with like federal revenue, and I think him and Kamala are quite similar. So just to preface, like I am happy that Trump was elected at the end of the day because he's on the hot seat, so we get to see like is he going to actually do this shit? There's no more what ifs, and so I am happy it's Trump in a weird way. But the one thing that I want to see as an American is I would like to see him actually come through with the things with like regenerative agriculture and creating some incentives for farmers to like do that. And just you look at like if you talk to a cattle farmer and just like they'll tell you that like there's no money in beef. Like
Hmm.
it's and my problem too is like so one of these guys was saying like you're gonna have to pay a little bit of a premium to buy from a rancher, and I don't think a lot of people are gonna want to do that if there's cheap stuff in the stores. So there needs to be like something like he needs to create an incentive for people to pay for like ranching or not ranching, but for like locally raised beef. And so I don't know specifics in regards to that, but I would like to see some more focus and support towards the cattle industry in America. But one more thing with that is like I go to the store and like a lot of like the pasture raised beef and stuff, it's all from New Zealand and from
Hmm.
Australia and like even like some of it's like from like New York, and it's like dude, why not like North Dakota or from locals in Illinois? Like why are they getting stiff armed? So if he can actually come through with something like that, I'll be very impressed.
Yeah, we shall see. So, don't have any real belief that he's going to make America healthy again?
Well, I have a tinfoil theory with that, and that's that he's not going to stop Ozempic. I mean, for all we know, he may have took it himself, and I could see like with this whole Ozempic stuff like getting into the mainstream, like what if there is a weight loss shift in America, and next thing you know, you got Trump out there saying, "Oh, weight loss is down." Or overweight rates in America are down because of me. I'm making America healthy.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That's a concern, but I don't think he knows shit about diet. Just do the
Yeah.
regenerative egg stuff, man, please.
Well, at least there's talk that that's happening, so that's good. But
Yeah,
I share your skepticism, and I don't believe that government's role is to make anyone healthy again. I think it's everyone's responsibility, and it's not that fucking hard. Like I've done it myself. I fixed my health. Super simple. The whole carnivore thing got me started. I'm not 100% carnivore, but God, it's like it's the easiest damn thing to do. Stop eating the
yeah.
bullshit in the center of the grocery store aisles, and and that's you're like 90% of the way there. It's like this isn't that
Yeah,
difficult. So I don't believe any politician is going to make us healthy again, and I also don't look to a politician like Trump, who is morbidly obese, and who makes a point of glorifying fast food. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. I posted on Twitter a while ago, like all these pictures of him with like McDonald's and KFCs. Like he
yeah.
he talks about all the time. He just loves fast food, and it's like you're the
Ozempic.
you're the make America healthy again guy, bro. Like I don't believe it. Don't believe it for a
Uh,
second. So
yeah, and just to build off like regenerative agriculture and stuff too. I mean, if he kind of buys into this Cali and Casey Means concept stuff
mhm.
as well, and lobbyism, if he can come at lobbyism with like big pharma and big food, that like fuck it, dude. Like if you're gonna do like the low corporate tax shit, the low whatever, like do that, whatever. But if you can come at pharmaceutical and big food lobbying and some incentives for United States farmers and ranchers, I'll maybe vote for JP Vance. But you got to do that shit. You got to do that shit. I'm like you, skeptic. So
Cool. I think the skepticism is a undervalued approach to the world. I think there's a lot of dum dums out there. Frankly, sorry everybody, but you look a little bit silly to me with your teams and believing all this these politician promises in election years. It's a little embarrassing to
yeah,
watch, frankly.
and even in the diet world too, even like in the community, there's a lot of, I know people hate this word, but like mansplaining and like know-it-alls, and like it's kind of funny because I see a lot of people that are actually really smart. Like not to like toot my own horn, I feel like I have a pretty good grip of this stuff. So I like come across a lot of people that are like pretty smart actually, and like a lot of them are influencers with a
Mhm.
lot of followers and they don't follow me back. But it's like when it comes down to execution, like you got to be able to execute. Like knowledge doesn't really matter if you can't execute. And so at the end of the day, you got to just fucking do that shit.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. So, getting short on time, so I want to give you a chance to talk about your new podcast, man. You're working with my buddy Klaus. Wanted to give you an opportunity to discuss what you're working on.
Yeah, so we started low carb logic. That's basically it's a podcast. Also do Twitter Spaces, but me, Klaus, James, we're all advocates of low carb eating, no carb eating, carnivore diet esque. But also we're just interesting to get a lot of different perspective from people on their ways of eating. I think anecdotes go a long way, and one thing that we really want to do is we want to get like a lot of semi-pro and professional athletes, especially high endurance cardiovascular athletes, just to kind of understand like their processes and stuff like that. And maybe that's a little cynical because we're all interested in like fitness, but I think there's parallels with diet, nutrition, and fitness. So maybe people will listen to some of this stuff and they might not mimic a diet, but there's always one little thing you can take away from these types of people. So
Cool, cool. Well, hey, I wish you luck with that. That was cool when I saw that come out. I was like, oh, it's a cool collab. I've been on your spaces before you launched Low Carb Logic and listened to a bunch of your content. So I was really stoked to see you actually pull the trigger and do a full podcast.
dude, yeah, and it was sick. We had you on the show. That was cool.
Yeah, yeah. When's that episode coming out, man? I want to see that.
Yeah, I know we got a little bit of a backlog, but that's coming out now. So we're gonna start dropping stuff. So it should be ASAP.
Yeah,
So
preaching the choir, man. For all those who've never done a podcast before, it is way more work than you think it's going to be going in. Like way more.
yeah, it is. It is.
Cool,
So
cool. Well, hey, thanks for pulling up, dude. Like, I think I've exhausted my desire to talk about politics anymore. I think I'm gonna
yeah,
flip my switch and get off the politics and go back into the whole world of self improvement and making the world a better place through conversation. So I'm gonna drop the political mic and y'all don't have to hear from me again.
yeah, we're all in the political sunken place right now. So time to throw some fucking what do they call it? Timeline detoxes out there. So,
Yeah, there you go, there you go. All right, cool, man. Well, hey, didn't give you a chance to tell people where they can find you.
oh yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Run Quasimodo. So I run, and I also don't have a colon, so I just came out with Run Quasimodo. So yeah, hit me up.
Right on. Hey, Goody, thanks for stopping by, man. It was definitely a pleasure, and hope to have you back sometime.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, bye.
Peace.